Alright, so today I want to make a video about this story, and it's in basically this person's response to the whole Don Cherry controversy, or whatever you want to call it. In that Jess Allen is her name, and she works for CTV, and she basically, in a segment that they were running talking about this whole situation, she basically went on a rant and um, talked about her disdain for hockey and how it's predominantly white boys that play it, or specifically white rich boys that play it. In that she's some of the things she said, I mean, I kind of understand where she's going at. Other ways I don't. Um, First of all, the reason why the majority of hockey players are white, it's pretty simple, because that's, I mean, if you were to ask the average white boy from Canada, of course he's going to be more likely to want to play hockey and be, Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid than, someone who's, a first generation or second generation or third generation immigrant who no one in their family's ever played hockey, they don't watch hockey, all this kind of stuff. So it doesn't really make much sense to, it's kind of like pointing out the obvious. It's like, you know, like going to a kid from India and, criticizing that, all the people that play cricket are from India or the Middle East. Like, well, yeah, it's a popular sport over there, and kids that grow up in those countries, they want to be, whoever the best cricket player is. I don't even know who it is off the top of my head. So it's kind of a stupid comment. As far as the other stuff goes, well, hockey is more of an expensive sport, but she doesn't criticize any other, hobby or activity that's expensive to do. Like, horse riding's expensive. She doesn't go and criticize, young white girls who, ride horses or any of this kind of stuff. So it's the gist of the story, basically, from what I can tell, is that the left has a very big disdain for white people, and specifically white boys and men, and the rich, or who they perceive to be the rich. And the main reason for that is whites, specifically white men, overwhelmingly don't vote for the left. So the left hates that, and they're going to denigrate and degrade them in every way, shape, and time that they possibly can. They're going to do that. So that's why they do that. And it's the same thing for the rich, is that in the left's mind, the only reason that poor people are poor is because taxes on the rich aren't high enough. Which, again, that's debatable, but the fact that, someone who makes $1 million is more than likely, roughly half of that's going to be going towards taxes. So if you're a millionaire, you're putting about $500,000 a year. I mean, if you're making $1 million a year, not if you're a millionaire, because there's a big difference there. But you're putting about $500,000 a year in taxes. You're maybe using $10,000 at the absolute most in benefits. So you're putting in way more than you're getting out. And if you're poor, if you're working a minimum wage job, or you're not working, you're probably putting in like 1,000, 2,000 at the most, and you're taking out definitely more than that. So the idea that the rich don't pay their quote unquote fair share, I think that's pretty easily debunked, in that if it's not their fair share, then what is? Because hundreds of times more than someone making minimum wage, like, how is that not enough? And funny, the left never tells people that, because if they actually told people the number that it actually is, I think a lot of people would take a step back and be like, hey, that is quite a bit more than what I thought it was. Like, whenever the left talks about that kind of stuff, they make it seem like someone who's rich is paying like 10 or 20% more than someone who's making like 50 grand a year, when in reality it's like 10 times more. So just thought I'd bring that up. And the last points that I wanted to bring up as far as this goes is that a lot of the people defending her were like, well, where are you guys on free speech? I thought you guys on the right were big on free speech. Well, the reason why we're going after her and saying she should be fired is because you guys believe that you guys are the ones that started the whole cancel culture, basically. So that's why you want, if you have a brain, that you want her to be fired, because the left has made it perfectly clear that they're not going to play by the rules. They're not going to advocate free speech for people on the right. So if you're on the right and you want to win in the culture war in any way, shape, or form, The only way you're going to win is to hold the left to the standard that they're holding people on the right, which means fire people regardless of the reason, or regardless of whether or not there's actual good reason. They do the tiniest thing wrong, they should be fired. That's what the left thinks. And if the right isn't going to hold the left or have the same standards as the left, then they're going to lose. They're going to get killed in the culture war. So their options are stoop to the left's level or lose. I mean, there's no in between. For anyone who thinks there's an in between, there isn't an in between. The last thing to mention too, I guess, would be, like I've said before, and I'll say it again, no one straight up ever says they're, I mean, the odd person does, but no one straight up rarely says that they're against free speech. They'll always advocate for policy or laws, namely hate speech laws, the whole gender pronoun, forcing people to say whatever they want to be called, kind of thing. Now, advocating for stuff like that is anti-free speech because you're forcing people to speak or not to speak. Words can't be hateful. Like, violence cannot be spoken. Violence has to be either verbal threats. I mean, the one caveat to spoken violence is threatening harm on someone. But saying that, I mean, I'm not going to say anything that could, you don't want the left, pointing out racial differences, pointing out the difference between men and women, saying that there's, I mean, the left thinks that they're exactly the same, you saying they're not. I'm not going to give any overt examples because that could get you banned. But everyone knows what they are. So basically, the whole, when it comes to the whole free speech thing, you'll never hear it on anyone on the left saying they're against free speech. They'll always advocate for hate speech laws and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the last point I wanted to bring up here. Like I said, basically the take-home point with this kind of stuff is that when you're on the left, you don't like people who disagree with you, and not only that, they have pretty bad hate for, and not hate in that they should be thrown in jail like the left thinks. Hate in that they're literally willing to do whatever it takes, ruining people's careers, ruining people's lives. For example, the Covington kids example. They're willing to ruin kids' lives who literally did nothing wrong whatsoever. They were literally standing there and smiling. So that's the extent that the left is willing to go, and what people on the right need to figure out is that if the left is willing to go this far, you're going to have to be willing to go close to it, because when it comes to most of these culture issues, the right is generally right, which means you don't have to go quite as far, but you're going to have to go pretty close, because people who are morally right, it doesn't matter how morally right you are in some situations, you're going to have to stoop a little bit lower, but you do want to stay as morally right as you possibly can. So basically, I mean, the reason why you see people doing stuff like this is that, like I said, whites, especially white men, don't vote for the left. The upper middle class people especially don't vote for the left. So people on the left recognize that, and they attack them all the time, which is why you see this hatred for white people on the left, and why they, accuse anyone who points out scientific racial differences between the races or between the genders as hateful, because pointing out those differences, they're not racist because they're differences. If two groups were exactly the same, then it would be racist or sexist, but they're not. And the reason why the left hates that is because the left has this idea that the only difference between, the only reason that there would be a difference between the groups, or the reason that you think there's a difference between the groups, is that you're prejudiced. And if they can keep up that idea, then they can continue to win in the culture war. But if the idea that there is group differences between groups, well, then the left loses, because their theory is the opposite of that. So that's about all I have as far as this video goes. If you'd like to, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.